If you don't eat at least 100 grams of protein at every meal, you will wither away. I'm just kidding, but that's what it feels like, right? From the sound of wellness influencers online, if you miss your protein goals even a little bit, your metabolism will tank and you'll lose all your muscle. Just to be clear, that's not what will happen. But protein is an incredibly important nutrient. We can't make it, so we have to eat it. We can't store it, so we need to eat enough of it every day. But how much protein is enough? What happens if you don't get that amount? And is it possible to eat too much protein? If you want a clear, evidence-based answer to your protein questions, you're in the right place. Welcome to Nutrition Nuance with Dietitian Ann, the podcast where you'll get a direct answer to the nutrition question of the day in the first 5 minutes. We'll spend the rest of the episode unpacking the science and how it applies to your real life. I'm your host, Ann Kent. I'm a registered dietitian, a certified diabetes educator, and intuitive eating counselor with a master's degree in nutrition. My goal isn't just to give you answers, it's to equip you with the tools to understand and apply nutrition concepts to your life, honoring your autonomy as the expert of your own body. Let's answer today's question. Are you ready to finally know definitively how much protein you need to eat? The answer is, it depends. Your protein needs depend on your life stage, your health goals, your health risks, how much and what type of exercise you do, how much you weigh, and if you are losing or gaining weight. I'm going to give you the evidence-based protein recommendations per day for different goals and needs in grams per kilogram of body weight, because that's how all of the recommendations and guidelines are listed. If you want to translate this into pounds, take out your calculator. Enter your weight in pounds and divide that number by 2.2. Now you've got your weight in kilograms, and you can multiply that number by the recommendations I'm giving you to calculate your actual protein needs. Fair warning, there are going to be a lot of numbers. So if you want a visual, check out the show notes for a link to a table that has all of this listed out. Next, I'll break this down into more practical recommendations, how much you need to eat per meal, and examples of what that would actually look like. Let's start with the first question. How much protein do you need per day? The first number for protein needs is the RDA, which stands for the recommended daily allowance. This is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. That equals about 55 grams of protein per day for a 150-pound person, or about 18 grams of protein per meal. Now, this is the minimum amount of protein you need. It's based on nitrogen studies that were done in the 1970s when they put a group of people in a room and calculated everything that they were eating, made sure they counted all of their food, and they found out exactly how much nitrogen they were losing in skin, hair, and yes, even excrement. Not very fun studies. And this number was to prevent a protein deficiency. It's not actually for optimal health. And for that reason, it's come under a lot of scrutiny recently. The 2025 U.S. dietary guidelines actually increased the recommended amount of protein to a range of 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per day. This is the number that most people need to remember. It calculates out to about 80 grams of protein per day for a 150-pound person, or about 25 grams per meal plus a small protein snack. This is a good number for the general healthy population, and it's a target that most people are actually meeting. The benefits of this slightly higher recommendation are mostly seen when someone is doing some strength training or exercise. And it would be a good goal for most people at that slightly increased need, including someone who's doing moderate exercise, who's doing resistance training and wants to maintain muscle, or for individuals who either want to improve their fertility or have changing hormonal status like perimenopause or menopause. This 1.2 to 1.6 goal is also good for those who are losing weight or taking a GLP-1 medication, primarily with the goal of maintaining muscle. Similarly, in an elderly population or frail, this goal is excellent to help them maintain muscle as well. Now, muscle is not just about eating enough protein. It's also about resistance training. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about muscle loss from normal aging or for people who are in healthy bodies who want to maintain muscle. But you can't just eat protein. You also need to do exercise for this amount of protein to be beneficial. Now, if you are doing intense strength training and really focusing on increasing muscle, you may need a higher protein amount, but it's honestly probably not as much as you think. There's this common recommendation circulating online recommending 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. That works out to about 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram, which is a lot higher than what we were just talking about. But the research consistently shows that even high protein need individuals should target 1.6 to 2.0 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. This is for people doing very intense exercise, intense training, or competing in sports at a higher level. If you do the calculations, it equals about 110 grams of protein per day for a 150-pound person, or 25 to 30 grams per meal, plus a 25-gram protein snack. I know this kind of sounds like a lot, but you could easily get this amount by eating a small palm-sized piece of chicken at each meal, plus a 1 cup of cottage cheese for a snack. Honestly, very few people need more than this, and those people are probably elite athletes who are working one-on-one with a dietitian or sports nutritionist anyway. So this number is not really necessary for the general population, and you can remember that 1.2 to 1.6 gram per kilogram per day guideline. Okay, but maybe you just did that calculation and found that you need 100 grams of protein per day. How are you going to get that? I know that seems like a lot, but you are not going to eat all of that in one sitting. Instead, it's actually better to spread the protein throughout the day. We find that it's optimal to eat between 15 and about 30 grams of protein at one time. And that's because your body sort of reaches a threshold for how much protein it can use to rebuild muscle. If you eat more than that, it's going to use the protein for calories and not really use it for its primary need. It's somewhere around 25 grams of protein at one time that this happens. In terms of timing, some athletes may benefit from eating that protein within 2 hours of a workout, but most of us honestly aren't training at that level. It's more important to get adequate protein than it is to time it perfectly. I also want to note that you get protein from a lot of foods, not just those we traditionally think of as proteins like meat and eggs. Here are a few examples of food additions that all have between 20 to 25 grams of protein. 3 ounces of chicken, fish, pork, or beef, which is about the size of a deck of cards or the size of the palm of your hand. A half cup of firm tofu or tempeh has about 20 grams of protein. 2 tablespoons of peanut butter plus 2 tablespoons of hemp seeds. 2 eggs plus 1 ounce of cheese, or 1 cup of Greek yogurt. And beyond that, even non-protein foods have protein. For example, a slice of bread has 2 to 3 grams of protein. A half cup of quinoa has 4 grams. That's not a lot, but including these foods throughout the day actually does contribute to your protein goals, which reminds me of another common question. Does the type of protein matter? The answer is yes, but maybe not how you would think it would. Right now, I've seen this huge push for animal protein, but this is really not evidence-based. You can get complete protein and meet all of your protein needs from either animal or plant proteins. Additionally, plant proteins have added heart health and longevity benefits. There's clear research that shows a lower risk of mortality, improved blood pressure, and better insulin sensitivity when eating plants and when replacing animal proteins with plant proteins. The reason for this is how plant proteins are typically packaged. Plant proteins usually have less overall fat, and if they do have fat, it's usually more heart healthy. They include more fiber, they include lots of vitamins and minerals, and they also have phytonutrients, which often act as antioxidants and anti-inflammatory properties. Okay, I know that was a lot of numbers, and if this information sounds new or different than what you've heard before, stick around, and after the break, if you'd like to understand why certain groups need more or less protein, learn about the potential downsides of eating too much protein, and how to make sure you're getting enough protein without measuring or counting every single freaking gram. Before we dig into today's topic, I want to share a quick resource in case you're thinking, okay, but how do I actually apply this in real life? That's exactly why I created my meal planning app, the Peas and Hoppy Meal Guides. Each week, you get a flexible meal plan built around balanced nutrition and variety. You can adjust the meals to fit your preferences, and the app automatically creates your grocery list, so shopping is faster and easier. If you'd like help turning nutrition knowledge into real-life meals, you can try it for free at peasandhoppiness.com. All right, let's get into the nuance behind today's question. There is a lot more nuance when it comes to how much protein you need to eat every day than what the average wellness influencer is telling you. And there is no perfect amount to eat. The answer to that question depends on what your goals are. Protein needs live on a continuum. When you eat less protein, your body becomes more efficient with using it for its essential needs. When you eat more than your essential needs, your body uses protein for things other than muscle building, like providing energy. If you are not eating the optimal amount of protein at every single meal on every single day, you are going to be okay. Your body is designed to adjust to all sorts of systems to stay in balance. To find your answer to how much protein you need, you first need to understand what protein is and what your body uses it for. Protein is one of 3 macronutrients that we need. The other 2 macronutrients are carbohydrates and fat. Macronutrients are needed in large amounts by the body, so we measure them in grams rather than micro or milligrams like micronutrients. Protein is considered an essential nutrient because it meets 2 requirements. 1, protein is necessary for our survival and growth as a human, and 2, our body cannot produce protein from other nutrients. We have to eat essential nutrients like protein in our diet, and we have to eat enough of them to have optimal health. Protein's job in the body is to provide structure and build things, including muscles, connective tissue like tendons and cartilage, skin, hair, and nails, red blood cells, antibodies, enzymes, hormones, and more. And how much protein you need each day depends on your health needs and your goals. You might need either more or less than the numbers we just talked about. You may have increased protein needs if you are in a stage of growth or if you are trying to prevent decline. For example, a life stage like fertility, pregnancy, and breastfeeding are all growth stages, and so your needs will be slightly higher. If you are undergoing catabolism or breakdown, like in weight loss, or especially with GLP-1 medication, or if you're in a status of changing hormones like menopause or perimenopause, or in old age when we tend to lose muscle, those are all examples of times when you want to make sure that you are getting plenty of protein. Or a typical growth stage would be strength training. You're actively trying to increase your muscle, and so you need to support that with adequate protein. The amount of protein you need is between 1.2 and 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight for almost all people. Unless you're at very high intensity exercise, would you need more than that? When you're calculating your protein needs, you should know that if you're in a larger body, this can overestimate your needs. So if you're in a larger body, you can use, instead of actual body weight, you can use a calculated quote unquote ideal body weight. Now, I want to be clear that this is not the amount that you should weigh. This is only to figure out what a reasonable protein target would be. For males, you would calculate that by taking 50 kilograms plus 2.3 kilograms per inch over 5 feet. For females, it would be 45.5 kilograms plus 2.3 kilograms per inch over 5 feet. As an example, I am 5'7", so I would calculate my ideal body weight by taking 2.3 times 7 inches and adding that to 45.5 to get 61.6. That would help me calculate an estimate of what my protein needs would be. Or you can just take an absolute target of between 80 to 120 grams per day. Okay, now there are actually some diseases that benefit from decreasing your protein intake. One of them is chronic kidney disease. The kidneys clear waste products like urea from the blood, and urea is produced when the body breaks down protein. So decreasing how much protein you eat reduces the amount of work the kidneys have to do. If you have chronic kidney disease, you may be able to slow the decline of kidney function by reducing your protein intake. But just to be clear, eating high amounts of protein has not been shown to damage the kidneys. We are talking about pre-existing kidney disease. If you're concerned about kidney disease, you need to talk with a doctor because the protein recommendations can vary significantly based on the stage of CKD, your lab values, and the type of protein you eat. Another more common reason you might want to consider adjusting your protein intake is gout. Gout is a very painful form of inflammatory arthritis, which usually shows up in the big toe, but it can be in other joints as well, like ankles, knees, elbows, wrists. It's caused by high levels of uric acid in the blood. It's mostly genetic, but diet can increase the risk with a high purine intake. Beer and other alcohol can increase uric acid production, as can other health conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, or kidney disease. But in terms of protein, red meat, fish, and shellfish are all high in purines, which can increase your uric acid levels. Instead, swapping these for soy, legumes, or low-fat dairy, which are low in purine, can actually lower your risk of having a gout flare-up. Another health concern related to high protein intake is kidney stones, especially if you have calcium or uric acid stones. The reason for this is because animal proteins generate more acid as they are metabolized, and so the kidneys have to excrete more calcium to maintain blood pH levels. If you have calcium or uric acid stones, the recommendation is to limit animal protein to 0.8 to 1.0 grams per kilogram per day, and instead increase plant proteins. We've seen the increased risk with high animal protein intake from meat and dairy, but plant proteins do not generally increase the risk of kidney stones. There has been some concerns about bone health and kidney function with high protein intakes, but these are not well established in the literature, and there's really no reason to be concerned. There is this interesting longevity paradox when it comes to high protein. We talked about protein being necessary for growth, and in the body, growth is essentially an pro-aging pathway. So this is a question about your goals, but especially in midlife, growth accelerates aging. And it does this with a couple of really specific pathways in the body, mTOR and IGF-1 signaling, which it turns on. As it turns out, those pathways that are meant for growth, either for building muscle, actually also have pro-aging properties. Now, this is a super nuanced conversation, and we don't need to get into it because later in life, actually higher protein intake can improve longevity through maintaining muscle mass. But I want to point this out because there is this message that all protein is good all the time, but it's a little bit more nuanced than that. It's not to say that high intake of protein is bad. It just means that eating huge amounts of protein all the time isn't always necessarily beneficial. So I'm going to bring you back to that goal of the target of 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram per body weight. This is a great target. It's not super high, but it is definitely adequate to give you those muscle building and those longevity properties. The other thing to consider is where you're getting your protein. There is this debate about whether you should get animal protein or plant protein. There are a lot of claims that animal protein is quote unquote more ideal for the human body, but this is really an oversimplification of what's really going on. Proteins are made of building blocks called amino acids. There are 20 amino acids that the body needs to function, and 9 of these are considered essential, meaning we have to eat them because we cannot make them. Both plant and animal proteins contain all of the essential nutrients. It's the amount of each of these that can vary. In animals, the amino acids are generally found in the amounts and ratios that the human body needs. In plants, the amounts and ratios can vary. Soy, for example, has a protein profile that's very close to the human body, but legumes and grains tend to have complementary amino acid profiles. So what that means is that if you are eating both legumes and grains, you will get all of the amino acids you need to function. So yes, you can get all of your protein needs from either plants or animals. But in terms of health, plant protein consistently provides more benefits. There's strong evidence to say that plant proteins are consistently associated with lower overall mortality, meaning your risk of dying, also improved blood pressure and better insulin sensitivity. This is compounded if you are swapping plant proteins in place of red meat, especially processed red meat. This is one of the most effective ways to lower your risk of cardiovascular disease and overall mortality. Then there are protein supplements. These are not necessary, but they can be convenient. If you struggle with getting protein in your diet, then protein supplements can be a helpful option. There are also natural forms of protein that you could add, so you don't necessarily have to do a protein powder. You could add things like hemp seeds, nut butters, nutritional yeast, or Greek yogurt to different meals or snacks and really increase your protein intake. It could be helpful, though, to add a protein supplement if you are at risk for under eating protein. I see this typically if someone is taking a GLP-1 medication, especially if the dose is too high, if someone is losing weight, or if they are completely plant-based, especially if they're not taking care to plan out where their protein is coming from. If you're looking for a type of protein supplement, I recommend to choose whey, soy, or pea proteins. All of these are going to be very nutritionally complete. Always make sure to look for a third-party certification if you are competing in sports to make sure those supplements are not contaminated. Okay, So how do you actually do this? How do you eat enough but not too much protein? How do you include more plants? And how do you do this without counting and measuring every single gram? I find that the simplest, most effective way to estimate your protein needs is using the healthy plate method. When you look at the plate, a fourth of it should be protein, a fourth of it should be a carbohydrate, and half of your plate should be some sort of plant. That's exactly how I plan the menus on the Peas and Hoppy Meal Guides app. When I do this, I double check the macros and make sure that each meal has at least 20 grams of protein. And it turns out when you're following this guide, it does it pretty well. I also make sure to include a variety of proteins on each week's menu. So there are options for animal proteins like chicken, fish, and even red meat. But there are also plant-based options, and there are options to make an entirely plant-based menu if you prefer. This is something that I really recommend if you are trying to switch over to more plant-based proteins, to not necessarily do it all at once, but to gradually add in more plant foods. And I call this a flexitarian approach. So you are free to do this at your own pace, whatever feels good to you. So when it comes to eating protein, here is what I actually do. Number one, I focus on the balance of the plate rather than counting macronutrients, and I make sure I get a solid, quality source of protein at every single meal. Number two, I spread protein throughout the day. I give extra focus to the meals that I struggle with. For example, I typically struggle with breakfast, so if I'm eating cereal, I will toss in some Greek yogurt or add some hemp seeds. I'll also add in protein snacks if I think that I might not have had enough protein at any single meal. And number three, I eat adequate carbohydrates. This is a little teaser for our next episode, but getting calories from carbohydrates lets protein be used for what it's supposed to, a building block, instead of needing to use it for energy. Most importantly, I want you to remember the mantra, be better, not perfect. Focusing on perfection and overly stressing about every gram of protein isn't necessary. Remember to zoom out and give yourself grace. Take it one meal at a time and enjoy what you eat. Thanks for listening to Nutrition Nuance with Dietitian Ann. If this episode helped you cut through some of the nutrition noise, I'd love it if you shared it with a friend or family member who might find it helpful too. And if you're looking for practical ways to apply what we talk about here, especially when it comes to planning balanced meals for real life, you can learn more about my meal planning app at peasandhappiness.com. Remember, nutrition isn't one size fits all, and you are the expert of your own body. I'll see you next week for another episode of Nutrition Nuance. The information provided in this podcast is for educational purposes only, directed at healthy adults, and is not intended as medical or nutritional advice. It does not replace consultation with a qualified healthcare provider or registered dietitian. Individual needs vary, and you should consult your own provider before making changes to your diet, especially if you are under the age of 18, are pregnant, nursing, have a medical condition, or take medication. The hosts and guests are not responsible for any actions taken based on this content. For questions, concerns, or ideas for other episodes, email us at podcast@peasandhappiness.com.